Today's acrylic cubes full of PowerPC shenanigans are brought to you by Squarespace. But more on that in a bit. These are PowerMac G4 cubes from the glorious year 2000, Apple's most adorable product failure. Despite being so beautiful that the Museum of Modern Art has one in their permanent collection, pretty much nobody actually bought one. Well, today we're gonna have some fun with an upgrade for it that was questionable and obscure even when it was new. This beautiful, slightly larger acrylic aftermarket case from PowerLogix. So join me as we build the chunkiest possible G4 cube. So stay tuned. And if you enjoy the forward-thinking technological optimism of early 2000s computing and industrial design, and then dragging those innocent computers screaming into the bleak dystopia that we call the modern web, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. These Apple G4 cubes are impossibly beautiful Power Macs from an era when Apple was at the pinnacle of both technology and design. Unfortunately, they were also a terrible value proposition. So they lasted about a year, from 2000 to 2001. Anyone who needed the kind of power that these machines brought went out and bought a G4 tower, which was also beautiful, but critically expandable. And anyone who didn't need this kind of power just bought an iMac, leaving the Cube for who? Well, the Cube was always one of my dream machines and always out of reach when I was a kid. So when I finally got one a few years ago, we tricked the ever-loving heck out of it with upgrades. But I came across one of the most obscure upgrades ever produced for it. This PowerLogix Clear Cube, a slightly larger cube enclosure meant to facilitate upgrades and provide a wee bit of extra airflow, and allowing you to relocate a common heat-related failure point, which we'll talk about later. It was actually what killed my first cube. So here's my plan. Every year at VCF East, I bring along my extremely upgraded G4 cube and run Minecraft on it. For some reason, that's a real big hit with the youngins. This year, I want to bring it, but with some additional upgrades. I want to use the super cool DOS-Dude 1 IDE SSD that we covered a couple weeks ago instead of the janky SATA adapter that's in this thing right now. And I want to install a newer version of Minecraft, which I think is going to run a little bit better. And finally, I want to transplant this cube into this PowerLogix Clear case so we can see all the wacky upgrades in there and, of course, all the RGB I put in there. Yes, I put RGB in this thing, and I'm proud of it. And I'll put more RGB in there too. Right after this word about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Create a fast, beautiful, and rich web experience for your business or brand using Squarespace's powerful all-in-one platform. It's really easy to get started, like, say I wanted to build a website all about building the ultimate G4 cube. Not only could I build it in minutes with Squarespace, but I could do it without writing a single line of code. There's a ton of beautiful templates that I could choose to start from, and from there, it's simple to build a great looking site that's also fast, responsive, and looks great on mobile devices. With Squarespace's extensive built-in toolset, I can also optimize for SEO, manage a mailing list, check my analytics, and much more, all geared towards managing your entire web presence. So check out squarespace.com/actionretro today for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use code ActionRetro to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So this upgrade is actually more than just the cool acrylic case here. It comes with a bunch of stuff, and actually the most exciting thing is this. The mounting plate is this awesome G5 PowerMac looking metal grate. This is what actually holds the Mac in place, but look how cool that is. It's like a G5 Mac cube almost, at least in design, and well, kind of in performance too, which if you've seen the previous cube videos, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then also, we have a relocator bracket for the VRM. All right, let me refresh your memory on what's going on inside this cube. So here is our ridiculously upgraded G4 cube in all of its naked glory. Right up front here is the GeForce 6200 graphics card, a PC graphics card that we hacked in here ages ago, along with 1.5 gigs of RAM, and deep within the confines of the cube, a wonderful red custom CPU upgrade card running at 2 gigahertz. And of course, powering it all, an aftermarket VRM. Because of course, this cube's original stock VRM, well, it had scorch marks on it because they are very prone to failure due to overheating in this tiny case here, which originally didn't even have a fan from the factory. Now, I'm a little worried because this gets mounted on this plate here, but we have an aftermarket VRM. So I don't think it's going to just fit with these stock screws and spacers here. But I actually want to take this a little bit more apart because there's no optical drive in here, but I found a replacement optical drive, and we're going to need to figure out some way to make room for it because inside here is a mess of cabling for the ever important RGB. Oh yeah, just look at that mess of stuff. All right, for now, let's disconnect this power connector, which goes to the RGB controller. And I actually found a different splitter since we're going to actually need to hook power to the CD-ROM drive. Well, DVD-ROM actually. All right, so we have our DOS Dude 1 SSD and our 3D printed DOS Dude Rules case, which I made. Okay, well, as I feared, the VRM is too tall with these big fancy capacitors to fit using this mounting bracket here and still be able to center the cube inside this acrylic enclosure and mount it. So I guess we're just going to have to leave the VRM where it was, which is fine because this is the upgraded VRM, so it shouldn't succumb to the overheating issues that the stock one does. All right, well, it's a few days later and I've decided to go in a slightly different direction with the case here. After a few choice Amazon purchases, I decided that since we're not using that bracket for the VRM, I'm going to use it to mount the awesome DOS Dude IDE SSD on this little adapter here with blinking lights, which is very important when you have an acrylic case. But I have one last thing we need to do. Since we're using this completely clear acrylic case, we're not actually going to have the Apple logo on the front anymore. We're just going to have this blank piece of metal, which I guess is kind of cool, but I've been holding on to something for a few years. This, from a gentleman in Sweden, is a reproduction of the Apple logo in translucent plastic meant to fit in a iBook G3. But I think we can super glue it right there so we can see it through the case, and I think that's going to look quite cool. Yeah, check that out. Gorilla Glue sticks to metal like gangbusters. All right, now to get this into this case, we need to put this on top here and then lift this into here. The official instructions, funny enough, tell you to use the old case for your G4 Cube as a stand, but I'm just going to use some random boxes. Oh, yes. And then they kindly provided new screws, which are longer to go into the original posts, and I'm going to use some washers added to it because, well, these are taking the entire weight of the computer, pressing down onto the acrylic. So I'm just gonna spread the load a little bit. Okay, so unfortunately there is a wee bit of a problem. We have 3 of the 4 posts connected, but this post can't actually go in with the aftermarket VRM, which isn't a problem in the regular cube, but it is kind of a problem here. So my ingenious solution is we're going to use a different screw, which I'm sure no one will even know about. And then I'm going to fish a nut up through the underside of the case to try to screw this into the top metal here. Oh God, I hate this. Oh, this might work. Oh my God, we have connection. I got it. All right, well, I present to you the Chungus Cube. There has never been a bigger, badder cube since the Battle of Wolf 359. This thing it's hideous and it's glorious, and that's my favorite kind of computer. I just hope to God that I never have to take this apart again because, yeah, gonna have to fish this screw out from underneath with a screwdriver to hold that nut in place. Anyway, let's fire it up and see if I messed something up or forgot to connect something. All right, well, time for first power on, and I'm pretty nervous, so I have our lucky purple hamster mouse here to make sure nothing goes wrong. Well, the RGB came on. There won't be a chime because, well, there's no speaker in the cube. You have to use external speakers. Hey! It's doing stuff. Oh, that's not happy. Oh no. All right, let me turn the lights off and see what this thing looks like in the dark with the glowing RGB. Whoa. It's like softly glowing from the interior. Lighting up all the shenanigans going on inside. Plus the pattern that kind of splays itself across the desk from the RGB shining through the bottom grating. That's pretty cool. Although I wish there was some way to illuminate the logo here. Maybe I can find an LED light to kind of shine down from the top, which should make that glow since it's translucent. All right, through the magic of FireWire, we are booting into some version of macOS 10. There are several installed on this drive. And through the magic of turning off the camera while I futzed about, we have macOS 10.5 installed. We're at 10.5.8 with our 2 gigahertz G4 and 1.5 gigs of RAM. And of course, our video card gives us hardware accelerated core image with Quartz Extreme, which is pretty wild for a G4 cube from the year 2000. Anyway, I've downloaded Minecraft 1.8.9, the PowerPC version from the Macintosh Garden. So let's see how it runs. All right, here we are, loaded into actually the worst biome possible for frame rate, but we're getting some playable frames, actually. Well, okay, sub 10 frames, but we're walking around and it's a little bit better than a slideshow. So I might actually keep this running Minecraft 1.5.2, which was getting playable performance, at least over 10 frames per second on this machine. But yeah, I mean, we have Minecraft. So we are ready for VCF East. All right, well, I know I said I never wanted to take this thing apart again, but, well, I took it apart again because a couple things. Well, mainly I wanted to figure out a better way to mount that SSD because the sticky tape that I used before wasn't really sticky enough to hold it on with the pressure from the cable pushing it out. I also want to redo some of the RGB cabling in there. It's kind of bunched up from me cramming that DVD-ROM drive in there, and I think it could look a little bit better. But we are up and running with Minecraft on this cube, and yeah, I can't wait to show it off at VCF East, which is coming up quite soon. And I'll be there all 3 days, April 14th, 15th, and 16th, with Steve from Mac84 and Mike from Mike's Mac Shack, now known as Mike's Mess, actually. And for the third year running, we'll have a display there with all sorts of wacky machines, including this weird cube and the cursed Mac and a couple other ones that I think you might like to see. But I'm going to call this video here. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more shenanigans like this, please subscribe down below. And thank you very much for watching. And a special thanks to Alex Hoffman, Camila Noseda, Chris Allegretta, Chris Biggs, Chris Calderon, Chris Nelson, Control-Alt-Reese, Daniel Hubbard, Greg Hrutke, Jason Pepez, Justin Hemmings, Justin Reed, Lyle Truid, Michael Mulhern, Paul Spencer, Ryan, Scott Thompson, Sutek, Tom Woodfin, and Unknown Soldier 41, who are my highest tiered patrons, and all of my Patreon supporters for helping to make these videos possible.